So this week on Marvel's What If, it's what if T'Challa became Star-Lord. Whereas the first episode was bringing in some familiar territory, putting in some new alterations, this one goes in more of the opposite direction, where it almost totally lets loose with all the kind of things that they can do with it by having T'Challa obviously be Star-Lord. The ragtag group of people that Peter Quill was friends with in the first Guardians film, a lot more down to earth and much more likable and not so untrustworthy. A redeemed Thanos. Before I saw this episode, I thought, how is that possible? But surprisingly, they actually won me over with it. And I said to myself, I think I need to get my head checked out because I'm actually rooting for Thanos. Thanos is actually a very caring and affectionate kind of character towards his friends, and his daughter Nebula, also voiced by Karen Gillan. And the things that they do to poke fun at his idea of genocide.
Although I still assert my plan was not without its merits. I'm pretty sure it's efficient.
Josh Brolin coming back to voice Thanos, that's even better. Some of the voice actors are a little bit hit and miss, like Djimon Hounsou is fine as his character from the first one, and it was really cool to see him sucking up to Star-Lord as opposed to being oblivious to who he was. Who? Star-Lord, man. Legendary outlaw? And seeing T'Challa in this light as a more lighthearted character was a very refreshing take, and thankfully it's very much in line with the tone of the previous two films by James Gunn, and never once does it seem tonally inconsistent, because the voice performance by Chadwick Boseman makes the character feel like, okay, I could see this guy fitting into that side of the Marvel universe, and seeing his father-son-like bond with Yondu, who's not so much of a hard-ass, for a lack of a better term, as much. It is still that way in a lot of ways, yes. But since we get to see more of that father-son dynamic that we didn't really get in the Guardians of the Galaxy with Peter Quill and Yondu, we see a little bit more of that this time around if he were to raise T'Challa after finding him in the forest in Wakanda. And I liked how they said that Yondu lied to T'Challa that Wakanda was destroyed after he left Earth, and then discovered an old message while in the Collector's room from a Wakandan ship. T'Chaka is still looking for him and hoping that somewhere out there somebody could find him and bring him home, leading to a really heartfelt scene between him and Yondu. And Nebula this time around, and first I was convinced that, yeah, she really is the bad guy after all, having gotten so used to how she was in the previous films. This one they pull a 180 on you and saying that she was actually in with T'Challa so that way they could get the embers that they wanted so she can earn the Collector's trust to get him in there, and then they could get their hands on what they wanted. And he has a few interactions with Howard the Duck, and they get the dog in the spacesuit back there too. And there's quite a few Easter eggs in here, like Korg's hand, Captain America's shield's in there, and a couple of daggers, which I'm assuming is one of them belonging to Drax, who shows up in here to get a couple of selfies with T'Challa, and seeing him suck up to Star-Lord was a nice little change of pace too, as opposed to Drax giving Star-Lord a hard time in the movies. And I found the ruse by Nebula to be pretty clever on her part. Since thinking about it, I thought, that's too easy. I'm not sure if that's all that there really is. And the Collector's right-hand woman ends up betraying her, like I believe that she did in the first Guardians. I can't remember exactly. And the Collector by Benicio del Toro, he's a lot more out there and flamboyant in my book than he was in the Guardians films. And they end up freeing everybody that was locked up in the cages by the Collector so they could get their revenge on him instead of T'Challa doing it. And he's brought back to his home in Wakanda, having accepted both of his families. And the cliffhanger that we get is Ego approaching Peter Quill, who's a Dairy Queen custodian, and his eyes light up, and I thought, oh my god. And this episode also reminded me of that dagger that Yondu uses when he whistles. Reminded me of just how scary that thing is.
Trust me, guys.
Duck.
So much better episode this week, and gives us more of a taste of what we could see from What If going forward. Those are my general thoughts. I'm still trying to figure out how to do a review of each episode week by week. I haven't really done this before, so bear with me as I try to navigate this going forward. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are, and I'll see you guys next time. And one last thing. Watching Chadwick Boseman in light of his death that happened last year, this was really, really tough, especially with the tribute that they threw in the credits. I just have to say, Chadwick Boseman, thank you for all the great roles that you've given us, and I hope that wherever you are, you have found a really good sense of peace, and thank you for keeping your spirits up when you were recording these lines, going through what you were going through. And I'm really, really sad to have seen you go, but thank you for leaving us with your legacy, and you will never, ever be forgotten.